Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's hearing. As before, I'm joined by my fellow panel members, Ms. Thuria Istefan and Mr. Ali Akbar.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Now, before we go back to our witness for today, who's going to be Mr. Meakins, can I just remind those of you who are not actively involved in the hearing to keep your cameras and microphones switched off at all times, please, unless for some reason you need to intervene. Well, we can now go back to Mr. Meakins, who's going to continue giving evidence this morning. Are you there, Mr. Meakins?
I am. Good morning.
Good morning. Nice to see you. You can see me and hear me clearly, can you?
I can, sir. Yes, very clearly.
Good. Thank you very much. We don't need to do the affirmation because you did that on Thursday, but I think we probably should just do the housekeeping. Can you confirm that you're in the room from which you're giving evidence on your own?
I am.
Good, thank you. Can you confirm that you don't have any other documents or materials with you?
I don't.
Thank you. And can you confirm that your mobile phone is in another room and that you don't have any other electronic device with you that is capable of receiving messages?
I can.
Good, thank you very much. Well, the system is the same as it was last week. Your legal representatives are, as it were, in the virtual hearing room following proceedings. If we have problems with sound or vision, we'll have a short break while we resolve them, but I hope we won't. And if you need to attract my attention for any reason, please just put your hand up or indicate in some way. Is there anything that you'd like to raise or any questions you have before we continue?
Not at this stage, sir, no.
Right, thank you very much. Well, in that case, I'll invite Ms. Grange to continue putting questions to you. Yes, Ms. Grange.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Mr. Meakins.
Good morning.
Now, when we broke off last Thursday, I had just been asking you about whether you recall a visit to Meakins in France in July 2015. And you said that you remembered attending a sales meeting at that time. You said that because you were new to the company and just a few weeks into the job, you were a little apprehensive at the time. Do you remember telling us that?
Yes, I do, yeah.
If we just look, before we pick up on some documents which we believe were presented to that meeting, I just want to look at what you say in paragraph 7 of your witness statement on page 2. This is MET 30053164, page 2. And if we look at paragraph 7 there, in the second half of the page, I just want to pick it up in the second sentence in the second line. You say there, I did from time to time attend internal Arconic training sessions, which will have included technical presentations given by Claude Verler, who manages Arconic technical sales support team. These training sessions were typically delivered by PowerPoint presentations coupled with a talk about the products offered by Arconic. I do not remember the details of these training sessions, but they would not have gone into detail about building regulations or other specific technical requirements for the UK market. They may have touched on fire performance at a high level, but I do not recall any training about specific fire performance requirements in the UK. So that's what you told us in your witness statement. Can we just look at some documents now? If we can go to MET 30535158 _ P07, and I want to look at page 107. So this appears to be, it's in a pack of documents that are all together, a technical news presentation by Mr. Claude Verler, and we can see it's dated the 2nd of July 2015 at the bottom of that slide. Do you see that there?
Yes, I do. Yeah, this was 2 months into my employment with the company, if I remember. So it would have been about 8 weeks, yes.
Yes, I understand that. But as we just discussed, you do recall going to Meakins in July
As I mentioned, yeah, vaguely remember going to Merksheim. It was my first time in Merksheim, so yes, I vaguely remember it.
Okay. And then if we go on to the next page, page 108, so this is a technical news presentation, and at 108, we can see the topics that are covered here. It says it's 2015's news and technical requests how to do. So it appears that these are topics that Mr. Verler is presenting. Now, if we then go to page 109 of the document, we can see there's a heading, certifications and technical approvals. And he's dealing with the Reno Lux and the Reno Bond products below that. And then at page 110, we move on to that. We can see there's a heading, limitation for perforations. And then at the bottom of that text, in the middle of the page, it says, new tests launched on Rainabond Black Core and Rainabond FR, trying to follow the new requested designs. Do you see that there?
I do.
And you've told us in your statement that you were aware that the colour of the core for ACMPE was changed in July 2015. That's right, isn't it?
I don't remember saying July 2015, but the core was changed throughout my employment at Arconic.
Yeah.
At some stage. But I don't remember it being in 2015. I just started with the company, so it would have been at some stage.
I see. Looking at this, does it appear likely that it was at this sales meeting in July 2015 that you learnt about that change to the black core?
If I'm perfectly honest, I don't remember this slide or this presentation whatsoever. So this is like the first time I've ever read it. It was obviously there, but due to, I guess, nerves or some, it was my first sales meeting. I hadn't really taken on board. I don't remember any of this.
I see. Well, let's just keep going through it to see whether any of it jogs any other memories. If we go to page 113, there's a heading, competition products analyze, and there's a target there to update the competition database in order to compare our products to others' direct or indirect competitors. Do you see that?
Yes, I do, yeah.
And then the next few slides deal with communication with the technical team. If we look at page 114, there's a heading there. It says 2 good and efficient ways of communication. And then we see those 2 ways set out in green in this slide: front sales or internal sales through to the technical department with the arrow, and then key accounts through to the technical department. Do you see that?
I do.
And this continues, this theme continues in the next slide at page 115. We can see then it says the non-efficient ways of communication, it would appear, with the technical department. And it appears to be saying in this slide that customers, distributors, architects, general contractors, engineering departments, going straight through to the technical department is it would appear something that's being discouraged. Do you see that?
I do, yes.
Can you remember that message being conveyed to you during this technical presentation or at the sales meeting?
During this technical presentation, I don't remember any of these slides. However, I do remember later on in my employment, the technical department were not so happy about contractors, fabricators contacting them directly. They would rather go through a sales person or an external guy. Yeah, but I don't remember those slides at all. Unfortunately.
I see.
I remember that.
I want to go on within the slide pack now and look at page 118. If we can pull up the same document, page 118. So this is part of the same pack, and this is titled here, Technical Quiz. And we can see that it relates to the sales meeting on the 2nd of July 2015 from the smaller writing at the bottom of this page. And then there are some initials there, PVO. Do those initials stand for Philippe von Thron?
I can't be sure. I wouldn't know. No, I'm sorry.
Are they likely to have been Philippe von Thron? He was in Claude Verla's team, wasn't he?
Could well have been, yeah. Sorry for talking over you. Yeah, could well have been.
Yeah. And it appears that this presentation was also part of the sales meeting from July 2015. If we look at page 119, one slide on, we can again see there's a date, June 2015, at the bottom of this slide pack. And we can see some information about who within the technical department is managing what. Do you see that?
I do, yes.
And what we appear to be being told is that CWE, Claude Verla, is managing certain things, product system certification, regulatory watch with the blue line. And then, for example, Philippe von Thron at the bottom of the page with the green lines, managing other aspects of technical teamwork, including fire certifications. Can you see that?
I can.
Again, do you recall receiving an explanation at this sales meeting as to what the different roles were of those within the technical department?
This was obviously at the sales meeting, these slides. I just cannot remember the slides, I'm afraid. So it was too early on for me. It was a new position. Maybe I just didn't take it in fully because it was a new sales meet for me. So I can't remember. I'm sorry.
I appreciate you don't remember these particular slides. That's your evidence. But do you remember receiving presentations from the technical team at that July 15 sales meeting?
No, I don't know. I honestly can't remember presentations that took place at that meeting. They clearly did, but they're not clear in my mind enough for me to say I fully remember the presentations, because I'm afraid I really can't remember them being presented. They obviously were, but I don't remember them.
I see. If we can go now to page 120, one page on within that presentation, the technical quiz presentation. What this presentation appears to do in the following slides is ask a question and then give an indication of what the answers were. So it would appear that either this was done as some form of quiz or as some form of presentation. And we note that it's in English, this presentation, and this isn't a translation. This was how it was provided to the inquiry. Does this suggest that it was delivered to personnel able to speak English?
From every presentation we went to, majority of the slides were in English, because obviously there were two English people there that didn't speak French, and of course in the international language. So yeah, it was done in English. Yes,
that's really helpful. So I think what you're saying is at these technical, during these technical presentations, they would be presented in English. Is that correct?
Yeah, majority of the slides would be, yes.
Yeah. And was that the case for the whole of the sales meeting that you attended in France, that you would commonly converse in English as opposed to French?
Generally, yes, it would be English. Occasionally they'd go into French, with the French representatives, or those that weren't so strong in English. There weren't so many of those, but there were a few guys that would, be spoken to in French. But in general, it was English, yes.
Yeah. So does it follow that the majority of those attending these sales meetings had a good command of English?
Oh, yes, yes.
If we go to page 123 within this technical quiz presentation, here we can see reference to a question about different cassette systems. What cassette systems should be recommended for an installation in a horizontal configuration? And you can see that the answer is being given with a green cross. And if you go to the next slide, 124, we can see a similar set of questions about the So this appears to be a way of conveying information, for example, about the technical requirements to do with the cassette and the rivet systems, yes?
Yes, from what I can see, yes.
And if we go on to page 129, here we can see a section headed fire certification of this presentation. And the question is, the fire test according to the Euro norms EN 13501 is a test based on, and then the answer is given that it's the product plus the fixing system and not, for example, the product only. Do you see that?
I do, yes.
So do you have a recollection of receiving some tuition at this sales meeting about fire performance?
I'm really sorry, I don't remember any of these slides whatsoever, which is unfortunate. I just can't remember any of that them slides.
Okay, I want to just keep going just for a few more pages. If we now look at page 130 in this presentation, we can see here that there's a question number 12. What is the fire reaction classification for Rayner Bond FR in accordance with the EN 13501 standard? And you get given the answer, which is that it's a B S1D0. Do you see that?
I do see it, yes.
And then if we go on to page 131, the next page, here the question is 13. What is the fire reaction classification for Rayner Bond PE cassette system in accordance with the EN 13501 standard? Do you see that?
I do see it, yes.
And you're being told it's not a B, it's not a C, but it's an E. Do you see that in this slide?
I do, yes.
And then the next page, 132, question 14, what is the fire reaction classification for Rayner Bond PE in the rivet system? And there you're told that the answer is that it's a C there. Do you see that?
I do see it, yes.
Now, you told the inquiry in your evidence last week that you were not made aware by Arconic, whether in your training or subsequently, of the European classifications for PE cassette and PE rivet. You said that at pages 141 and 142 of your evidence last week on day 89. It would appear to be the case that at this presentation, those present were informed of these European classifications in July 2015. Do you accept that?
Well, in my defence, I'd started with the company. I was 8 weeks into my employment. This was all very new to me. I wouldn't have taken that on board and understood really what it meant, because I was just a newbie to the company. If I'm absolutely honest, this wouldn't have gone in my head, and I would have taken it on board. It was all a sort of bombardment of technical things that they were flashing up on the screen. I guess that I can't even remember the slides. So it was just very new to me, only being 8 weeks and still on my training. I don't remember it.
At these sales meetings, would you be provided with a hard copy pack of the presentations that you were receiving during the time there?
On some meetings later on down the years, I remember having some sort of literature that we could perhaps take with us. But in general, it was on slide. You would see it. I think you could probably have a copy of the presentation if you asked for it, but nothing really in hard format. It was done via, obviously, the presentation, overhead projection.
Sorry. Do you ever remember asking for a copy of the technical presentations that you received?
I can't. I think I had so much information given to me when I first started, with folders of people's names, what they do. It was just I had a big pack of an induction pack, I guess. At that stage, I wouldn't have asked for any overhead, any sort of copy of the presentation. No.
Would you agree that these presentations demonstrate that the sales team were expected to know technical material, at least at some level of detail?
Looking at that presentation that you've just shown me, I assume they would have expected you to have some sort of knowledge. But as I said, I can only go back to my defences. It was all very new to me. I was 8 weeks into the employment, and I would have hopefully have picked it up along the line. But this was very, very new to me.
Yes, can we look now at page 134 of the same presentation? This is still within the fire certification section. So this says 15, and the main question appears to be about the Raynaud product. Does the Raynaud get the A1 classification in accordance with the EN 13501 standard? And then there's a table below which is giving fire performance information about different Arconic products. We can see that the A2, the Raynaud A2, has been ringed in the middle of the page. And in that central column under fire class, it says non-contribution to fire. And then in the far right-hand column, there's a column for typical application, and it says that the A2 product can be used in all type of building facades and internal use. And then we can see what's said below that about the FR product, Raynaud B1 called FR. In the middle of the page, it says a very limited contribution to fire. And in the typical application is said to be maximal building height of 28 meters to 35 meters, depending on the country. And then below that, we have the PE product. It's titled Raynaud B2, called PE. And in the middle column, fire class, we can see it says flammable. And the Euro classification is said to be C to E. And then in the typical application on the right-hand column, we can see it says maximal building height of 8 meters to 12 meters, depending the country. Do you see that?
I do, yes.
Now, do you have any recollection of being given guidance at this time of what the applications were for different Raynaud products?
I don't recall seeing this slide again. So this to me is, I'm digesting it as we're speaking. I think at that early stage, when I'd gone to this sales meet, I would have expected to have sort of learnt things down the line, but nothing was explained to me in depth, apart from this slide that you're saying was at the sales meet. So no.
I see. You told us in your evidence last week that you were not told there was a difference in the type of applications that the different cores could be used for, nor were you told by anybody at Arconic on the technical team not to use PE at certain heights. Now, do you agree that if you'd seen this slide, it does deal with common maximum height restrictions associated with the use of different Raynaud products, including the PE cord Raynaud?
I think looking at this slide that you've just shown me, I don't know if it appears, and I've never seen that ever since throughout my employment with the company. So this is the first time I've actually seen this talking to you. It would have obviously helped, I guess. But no, I the first time I've seen the slide, so it's new to me.
I see. But it's likely that you saw this slide, isn't it, at the July sales meeting, given we know you attended that meeting, and given this was clearly a technical presentation that was meant to be informative to personnel selling Raynaud products.
It's likely that I would have seen this slide, yes. I just can't remember, and it frustrates me that I can't remember seeing the slide or any of the slides that you've shown me. But I can only put that down to being a bit nervous about being at the first sales meeting and all the new people that were there and all the new products that were being sort of thrown at me. So, yes.
Did that kind of information ever prompt you to inquire about what the position was in the UK about the use of PE and whether it was restricted at certain heights?
At that stage of my employment, no, it didn't. I use this word, I don't like using it, but I assumed that everything that we had was ready for us to go into or it's been put into the UK market for many years. From what I understand, PE has been in the UK for over 30 years. And in my opinion, I honestly believe that that product was a safe product to use in the UK, or else I would never have been using it. And that's as simple as that.
I see, but I think you told us last week that you would have known that it wasn't the correct product for certain applications. That's right, isn't it?
It would have been down the line, yes. At that stage of my employment, for 8 weeks into the employment, I wouldn't have had that knowledge. I wouldn't have asked the questions. And I wouldn't have really digested what that was. But later on, as I've said, obviously you're aware of what product to put in what application.
Yes, I see. Can I just look at 2 more of these slides? Can we go back to the slide pack and look at page 136 now of that same document? So this is question number 17. And the question is, what is the meaning of the different letters in the classification B, S1, D, naught? Do you see that there?
I do see it, yes.
And you're being told that the B relates to the spread of fire and energy released, the S1 to smoke, that's capacity, opacity, and then D naught is debris and flaming drops. Do you see that?
I do, yes.
And then we've got some pictures which appear to include some of the European tests, the single burning item test on the right in those images. Do you see those images?
I do see the images, yes.
And then if we go to page 137, the next slide, this is also part of question 17. The question is, what is the meaning of the different letters in the classification B, S1, D naught? And what we can see is there's some technical graphs below that. Then on the right-hand side, there's a title with a little arrow next to it in red, the propagation speed of the fire in function of total energy liberated by the samples. And we have a table which talks about time to reach the flashover and then the Euro class. And what we see is, this is giving you some indication of how long it takes to reach flashover as it's been defined in a particular way here against different Euro classes. And we can see that for E, at the bottom of this table, the time to flashover appears to be less than 2 minutes to get to E, whereas for B or better, the time to get to the flashover is greater than 20 minutes. Can you see that?
I can, yes.
So can you remember coming away from this sales meeting with an understanding, at least in general terms, that the Euro class B and above were the better classes and down to E was the worst fire performance?
We're talking about 2015, June. No, I can't say I ever come away from that meeting with a better knowledge and any knowledge of this. I don't remember seeing the slide at that time because I say I was very new to the company, as you're aware. So I'm sorry, no, I can't remember any of this sticking in.
Do you remember getting the clear message that the fire performance of the Rainabond PE cassette panels was by far the worst performance?
I can't say that I do. No, I didn't take, as I said, I didn't take it on board because I was very new to the company. So I can't, wouldn't have taken it on board that any of the products were not fit for purpose, if that's what we're saying.
I see. Let's move on now. I want to ask you about the BBA certificate, the 2008 BBA certificate for the Rainabond panels. Before you joined Arconic, were you aware of what the BBA, the British Board of Agreement, was? Did you know what it was?
I knew a British Board of Aggregate was a kite mark. It was a standard independent document that not everybody used, but it was there for the construction industry if need be.
So that was your understanding of what the purpose of a BBA certificate was, yes?
In my opinion, yes, yes. I thought it was there for confidence in buying materials, perhaps.
How regularly did you provide the BBA certificate to your customers?
I wouldn't have personally provided the BBA certificate to my customers. It would have been, are we talking about, Arconic here, or Alcoa Arconic, when I was working for them, or are we talking about other companies?
No, I'm talking about your time at Arconic.
Sorry, Arconic, yeah. The BBA certification, if it was ever needed, would have been sent via the office, either the internal staff, or generally it would have been the technical staff would have forwarded on a BBA if they needed a BBA.
I see. So did you ever use it as a marketing tool, a document that could be used to support the sales that you were trying to achieve?
We were asked for the BBA, yes, on several occasions, and we didn't have the BBA for certain materials. As you're aware, for the A2 material that we're trying to launch, there was no BBA. So therefore, we couldn't sell it in the UK because we were asked if it did have the BBA. The competitors had a BBA certification for their A2 material, and that was a bonus for them. But we didn't have one. I know we were working on it, and I was asking over and over again, when are we going to get some sort of BBA? Okay. But unfortunately, it never come to fruition. We never actually got the BBA for the A2 materials.
Okay. To your knowledge, did customers rely on this BBA certificate when deciding whether to use the Rainabond panels for their project?
Not all customers. There were certain customers that would say that you need a BBA for the UK market, and they would insist on having the BBA. But that wasn't in all the cases. Some of them were just, because it was an independent piece of paper, they weren't really interested in the BBA. But the majority of people did want a BBA because our competitors had one as well. Yeah.
Can we look at your witness statement about the 2008 BBA certificate now? It's page 32 of your statement at paragraph 97. It's right at the bottom of that page. You say this, you say, I'm not in a position to make a determination as to whether or not the product supplied for the Grenfell Tower project fell within the scope of the BBA. By way of example only, in the behaviour in relation to fire section of the BBA certificate, there are references to fire performance tests having been conducted on grey, green, gold and metallic grey painted Rainabond. The BBA certificate states that the fire test performances may not be achieved for different colours. None of the colours referenced in the BBA certificate were supplied for the Grenfell Tower project. In those circumstances, the BBA certificate notes that the customer should perform a test or assessment in accordance with approved document B. So in your witness statement, you're bringing to our attention a number of aspects, particular aspects of the BBA certificate, including the colour limitation, and that it notes that the customer should perform a test or assessment in accordance with ADB. Can we look then at that BBA certificate? This is BBA 6047. Here we have the certificate. Now, you told us in your evidence last week that you only ever glanced over it. That was at page 122 of day 89 last week. I'm going to ask you again, is it really your evidence that you never read this certificate during the time that you worked as Arconic sales manager?
Yeah, if I could just explain the whole situation here. First of all, as you're aware, I had absolutely nothing to do with the Grenfell Tower project. The document that the statement that you've just read out was a statement that I would have added after the fire, because I've done obviously a lot more research into what the BBA was about and what it said on that BBA after the tragedy. But before that, absolutely, I would have glanced over the BBA and not really, as I've mentioned before to you, really understood the ins and outs of the BBA. But obviously, since the tragedy, the fire, I've looked, but as I've said, I had nothing to do with the Grenfell Tower, so it was very difficult for me to comment.
Yes, I see. Did you understand that the certificate makes claims about the fire performance of the Reynabond panels?
Sorry, we're talking...
So
can you repeat that question?
Let's focus on the period 2015-2016. Did you understand that the BBA certificate made claims about the fire performance of the Reynabond panels?
I knew, as I mentioned before, that there was a Class O mentioned in the BBA spread of flame, but that's about as far as it went, I'm afraid.
If we could look within it, at that first page again, if we could have it back up on the screen. In the middle of the page, there's a heading in capitals, key factors assessed. Do you see that?
I do see it, yes.
Yeah, we have that now nice and clearly now. And then 3 headings down underneath that in bold, it says behaviour in relation to fire. And it says in relation to the building regulations for reaction to fire, the panels may be regarded as having a Class 0 surface in England and Wales and a low risk material in Scotland. Now, can you just tell us, what did you understand that to mean? The panels may be regarded as having a Class 0 surface in England and Wales.
As I've mentioned before, the Class O surface, Class O, I took a spread of flame. So it meant that the flame would spread across the material. And that's about it, if I'm honest. I don't really know any more about that.
Did you understand that all Reynabond panels could be taken to have a Class 0 surface based on that statement in this certificate?
I assumed that they would have been all of the products, because I was never... The really frustrating thing for me is the fact that it was never actually brought up to me that the certificate wasn't good enough for the UK market by any of my customers, or the technical team never sort of mentioned any of this. So I took it as, yes, we had the BBA certification and it was Class O, it was spread of flame, and it was good enough for the UK market.
Yes, and just to be absolutely clear, I think you started answering this way in that answer, but I want to have your evidence clearly. Did you understand that that covered all Reynabond panels, this certificate?
I understood it covered everything that we had, the PE and the FR at the time, because we didn't have the A2, as you're aware, sir.
I see. And so the limitation on colour that you explained to us in your witness statement, that was not a limitation that you were aware of at the time you were using the certificate in 2015, 2016, is that right?
That's the truth, yes. I didn't realise that the colours made a difference, really. Obviously, until it was delved into, and I looked into it at a later date.
So your understanding at the time was not that only certain colours were covered in this certificate. That's right, isn't it?
That's correct, yes.
If we now look at page 3 of the certificate, there's a heading there, General, on page 3. Do you see at the top of that page, we've got the heading General. And then the third paragraph down says this: it is important for designers, planners, contractors and/or installers to ensure that the installation of the cladding is in accordance with the certificate holder's instructions and the information given in this certificate. Now, can you help us as to what that meant?
I can't, I'm afraid, no. I don't understand really what it means.
Were you ever aware of any certificate holders' instructions that were relevant to the installation of these panels?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question? I don't quite understand the question.
Yes, so
sorry.
If we look back at the certificate, the part we just read, if we could bring it back up on the screen. in that third paragraph under general, it says it's important for designers, planners, contractors and or installers to ensure that the installation of the cladding is in accordance with the certificate holder's instructions. And my question is, were there any certificate holder's instructions that were relevant to the installation of this cladding?
No, I don't remember seeing any, no.
And then under, below that, there's a heading technical specification, and item 1 is a description. And then, yes, thank you. And then under 1.1, that first paragraph, if we pick it up in the second line, at the very end of the second line in the second sentence, it says here, the panels are available either plain edged riveted system or flanged cassette system to suit architectural requirements. Do you see that there?
I do see that, yes.
It's telling you that these panels are available in 2 different configurations, either a riveted system or a cassette system. And then at the bottom of the page in figure 1, if we can have a look at that, we can see a diagram of a riveted system on the left and a cassette system on the right. Now, when you were dealing with this certificate and providing it to customers as necessary, were you aware that it made reference to both the riveted and the cassette systems within it?
If I'm absolutely honest, no, I didn't. I would have glanced over it and seen it, but it wouldn't have made any major impact on me. I mean, it would have either been a cassette or a flat fix. They were the 2 main ones.
But did you assume that the information in the certificate was relevant to both the riveted and the cassette version of the product?
Well, looking at the information that you've shown me, yes. But otherwise, I wouldn't have digested this, no.
Now, we know, having looked at those slides from the sales meeting in July 15, that there was a difference between the fire performance of rivet and cassette fixed panels. Can we agree that this certificate doesn't make any distinction as to the fire performance of rivet versus cassette fix?
If there's no information on there, then I assume no. Yes.
Did you ever question why the difference in fire performance between the rivet and cassette wasn't made clear in this BBA certificate?
No, I didn't.
Did it ever occur to you that that was a distinction that ought to have been made clear in this BBA certificate?
No, it wouldn't have occurred to me because, as I mentioned before, I mean, the first time I'd seen these slides that were given at the sales meet, it was all very new to me. I wouldn't have, at that early stage, assumed or thought that it would have made any difference.
We saw that in those slides that you were made aware that the PE cassettes achieved a Euro classification of E. Did you ever ask why the Euro classification of E wasn't anywhere in this certificate for the PE cassettes?
No, because as I've mentioned before, I don't remember them slides. I don't remember even having that presentation presented to me. Genuinely, hand on heart, I was new to the company. Just don't remember that early back. So I wouldn't have asked that question. I'm sorry.
Let's look at section 6 of the certificate on page 5 of it. If we could have the document back, page 5, please. Behaviour in relation to fire is at section 6, and at 6.1 we're told that a standard sample of the product with a grey-green Duragloss coating, when tested for reaction to fire, has achieved a classification of B, S2D0. And then we're told that a fire retardant sample, an FR sample, with a gold-coloured finish, achieved a classification of B, S1D0. So the classification, the Euro classification on this certificate is being said to be basically a B, with some difference in the smoke and droplets figures. Were you aware that the Euro classification referred to in the BBA certificate was a B, basically a B?
No, I wasn't aware.
Did you understand at 6.1 that the reference to a standard sample of the product was referring to the PE product?
No, I wasn't.
And so it's your evidence, is it, that you didn't ever notice that that B classification was different to the C and the E, which are the classifications that were in that technical presentation from July 2015?
I'm sorry, once again, I didn't digest this in 2015 and I wouldn't have known, no.
Did you ever come to understand that there were any inaccuracies about the BBA certificate at any time prior to the Grenfell Tower fire?
What I don't understand is that if there was such big inaccuracies in the BBA certification, why this was never raised or brought to my attention. I understand I could have looked at this in depth, this BBA certification, but no was the answer to that, because nothing was ever raised, nothing was ever brought to my attention to say that this BBA certification had what it had on it.
Were you ever aware of any concerns at all about the BBA certificate that were drawn to your attention by customers?
I can't remember any customers coming forward to me and actually saying, this is wrong, this BBA, for whatever reason.
Do you ever remember them coming forward and saying, this is unclear, we need greater clarity than that which is provided in the BBA certificate? Do you ever recall that happening?
I can't recall a specific instance, no. I don't remember anybody actually asking me for a different BBA or why it was in the BBA certification. If I would have been asked that question, then it sounds like all I'm doing is putting my questions to the technical team, but that's what happened. If I had a customer, a fabricator, a main contractor, or whoever it may have been, or a specifier, ask questions about the BBA certification, it would have automatically been diverted to the technical team in Merksheim. And that generally would have been, my contact would have been Claude Verley, head of technical.
Yes, yes, I see. Did your clients ever ask for the underlying test or classification reports that underpin this BBA certificate? Did you ever get that kind of request?
I can't recall having the request. Nothing sticks out in my mind. Nobody actually confronted me personally. That's not to say that they would have contacted France themselves and asked the question.
Yes, I see. Going back to the certificate now and staying on that same page in that section 6, page 5, we get some more information at 6.2 and 6.3. 6.2, it states that a fire retardant sample of the product with a metallic grey finish, when tested in accordance with BS 476 part 6, and then when tested in accordance with BS 476 part 7, achieved, and then it talks about a class 1 surface spread of flame. Can you see that at 6.2?
Yes, I can, yeah.
And can you see that it only refers there to a fire retardant sample achieving those test results? Do you see that?
I can see that, yes.
And then below that, it says at 6.3, as a consequence of sections 6.1, where we get the Euro classifications, and 6.2, where it's referring to some BS standard tests, the products may be regarded as having a class 0 surface in relation to approved document B of the building regulations. Now, did you understand from paragraph 6.2 that it was a fire retardant sample which had achieved the stated results in the BS 476 series tests?
I understand that by looking at this, the document now as we speak, but at that time I wouldn't have understood that. I didn't read it. I didn't digest it. So I didn't sort of take it on board. No.
Does it follow then that you never questioned why there's no reference to the PE or standard sample of the product undergoing similar tests to BS 476, part 6 and part 7?
That's correct. I wouldn't have questioned that, because I assumed the word I don't like using it, as I said, but I would have assumed that the document would have been, up to scratch, if you like.
Yeah. Did you know prior to the Grenfell fire that BS 476 testing was relevant to National Class Naught?
No, I can't honestly say I did.
And then just finally on this certificate, we can see the colour limitation. If we can go back to section 6 on page 5, we can see at section 6.4 in the middle there, it says these performances may not be achieved by other colours of the product. Do you see that?
I do see that, yes.
And that those colours should be confirmed by, and in England and Wales, it said it should be confirmed by test or assessment in accordance with approved document B. Now, I think it follows from your earlier answers that you weren't aware of that colour limitation prior to June 2017, is that right?
That's correct, yes.
So does it also follow that you would have never said to your customers that certain colours were not covered by this certificate?
If I was unaware of that, I can't recall ever talking to any customers about certain colours because I wouldn't have been aware of it. So, yes.
Yes, thank you. I want to move on now to ask you about your general awareness of cladding fires. In the years before you commenced your role at Arconic, so this is before May 2015, did you ever become aware of any domestic or international cladding fires?
I only found out after the Grenfell fire that there were various different fires. And one of them, I think, was in Dubai or somewhere with regards to a similar material. But no, prior to the Grenfell fire, I was unaware that there were any major fires in the countries, if you like.
So you hadn't heard of the fire at Lacknell House in Southwark in 2009, resulting in 6 fatalities?
No, I hadn't, no.
And were you aware of any fires in the UAE prior to starting at Arconic?
No, I was unaware of any fires that stood out in my mind in the UAE.
And what about after starting at Arconic between May 2015 and the Grenfell fire? Were there ever any discussions with anybody within Arconic about either domestic or international cladding fires?
I'm sorry, I'm trying to think. I can't recall ever having a conversation with anybody about certain fires that took place while I was in the years at Arconic. No. Okay.
Now, in terms of marketing material that was available to you, I want to ask you some questions about that now. You mentioned in your witness statement a number of marketing brochures that were available to you, and I want to look at one of those which was available when you began working at Arconic. If we can go to ARC 50456, and we may need the offline high quality version of this brochure. So it's ARC 50456. Yes, thank you. So this is a Rainabond Rainolux brochure, which we believe is entitled Transform, Create, Fascinate. Does that, do you recall that?
I remember this brochure, yes.
Yeah. And it looks like it was a folded brochure from the way that it's presented here. Is that right?
If my memory, yeah, I do believe it was a folded document. Yes, yeah.
And there is a date that we've seen on this brochure, which appears to date it at August 2014, 08/2014. I can't see that at the moment, but we'll come back to that. Actually, there's a date, hang on, yeah, there is a date in the bottom right-hand corner, 5th of August 2014. Can you see that?
Yes, I do see it, yes.
And did you use this brochure yourself to promote Rayner Bond sales?
No, I didn't, not this particular brochure. If I remember rightly, I think this brochure was given to me as some sort of little handover from Deborah French, or a similar brochure that was slightly out of date, so we never used them anymore.
I see.
So yeah, this wouldn't have been presented to customers. I don't remember. I remember seeing the brochure.
If we can pan back out of this brochure, and then we can go to page 2 of it. Actually, I think this might be page 2 already. What we can see in the left-hand page on the side, can you see, is that it says it's got a core of PE or FR. That's in the labels on the left-hand side.
Yeah, I can barely see that. Can we blow it up slightly?
Yeah, if we blow up the bottom left-hand side of this brochure.
That's brilliant, thanks. Can see that.
At the bottom. Yes, so what we can see is it says that the core is either PE or FR.
FR.
And then it talks about a pre-painted aluminium sheet below that. And then I just want to look at the first page of this brochure on the left-hand side. Is there an earlier page to this brochure? I think there should be a page before this, actually looking at it now. The reference I have is ARC 50456. You got that? Perhaps if we could just bring up that, without bringing up the offline version, can we just bring up ARC 50456? Yes, so this actually is the first page of the brochure. So here we can see on the right-hand side, the heading Transform, Create, Fascinate. And I think what we were looking at in the better version was page 2 of it. Now at the bottom of this page, we could blow up the bottom left of this page. We see some fire classification information. And with Europe, it's not very clear on the page, but you can take it from me. But with Europe, what we get is the FR is said to be a B. So all we can see in this table is the fire performance for Europe of the FR panel. There's no reference in this brochure to the class naught, the national classification, and there's no reference at all to the fire performance of Rayner Bond PE. Now, can you help us as to why that information wasn't included in this brochure?
I'm afraid I can't. I don't know why that information wasn't put into the brochure. Since I've seen the front of the brochure, it looks slightly different from the up-to-date. I guess you've got an up-to-date brochure that we would have used later on. But I can't answer that. I don't know why the PE wasn't.
Okay, yeah, we have a much clearer picture of that table now. Thank you. On the table, on the page here. And you can see there that the EN 13501 classification is given for FR as a B, but there's nothing for the PE core, for the standard core.
No.
If we pan back in that first page and look to the far right-hand column at the top, if we could pan out, I want to go to the right-hand part of this page. Yes, can you see there on the far right-hand side, we've got an image of a high-rise building. Can you see that?
On the front page, yes, I can, yeah.
Yes. And yet there's nothing in this brochure to suggest that the PE core might be unsuitable for use at certain heights. And again, does it follow that you can't help us with that either?
Yeah, I'm not sure if these buildings that they've put in there, the high-rise buildings, were projects from the UK, or they could have been. I'm not sure if they used this brochure in Germany and just translated it into German as well as in French. But I can't answer that. I don't know why.
I see. I mean, this material is in English, and my understanding is this was an English version of the brochure.
Of course, yes, I understand. It's just that the picture on there, I'm not sure if they left the same picture in there. I don't know. It would have been taken in a European country. But no, I can't answer that question, I'm afraid. I'm sorry.
I see. So, but can we agree that someone would have to study this document pretty hard to notice that there was a PE version of the product? We saw that in the little label on page 2. But the fire performance of that product is nowhere set out in this brochure. Can we agree that?
I think, yes, someone would have had to look at that to find out there wasn't the PE in there, because I didn't.
I see. I now want to ask you about some presentations that you gave in your role as UK sales manager to promote Rayner Bond. If we could look at paragraph 17 of your witness statement now on page 5. So here you tell us, I'm going to read it with you. It says, I inherited a PowerPoint slide deck, which I understood from the marketing team at Arconic had been prepared by my predecessors for presentations designed to be delivered to RIBA, the Royal Institute of British Architects, as part of its continuing professional development programme. In order to deliver any presentation to RIBA under that programme, a provider, including a manufacturer of product, would need to be accredited by the RIBA, which would then also involve the payment of considerable fees to the RIBA. I do not know if any version of the presentation was ever in fact delivered to RIBA. And then you say that there's a copy of the slide deck in your exhibits. And then you go on just below that, you say, my only contribution to the content of those slides was to make adjustments to the title page, including my name and position as UK and Ireland sales manager for Rayner Bond Architecture and Corporate Identity. My understanding was that this slide deck had been prepared by my immediate predecessor, Deborah French, in 2014. When I reviewed that slide deck, I considered that it would require some amendment if it were to be used in a, then we go over the page. If it were to be used in a presentation to any architects, whether at individual practices or as part of a CPD programme for the RIBA. As it happens, I never got round to making those adjustments for any architect audience, but because the slide deck contained useful information regarding fabrication, I did use the slides at some meetings with fabricator customers or target customers. And then you go on and you say you never presented to the RIBA on this. So it would appear, is this right, that you did use these slides at some meetings with fabricator customers or target customers? Is that right?
That's correct. The slides would have been used, or the presentation would have been used to bring back the fabricators that unfortunately left and weren't using us over the years. They'd used us in previous years, but my aim was to bring on as many fabricators as possible, and the slide deck was useful really just for them to get an idea of what Renabond was about, really, and hopefully bring them back on board with us. So yeah, that's all it was used for.
And who were the target customers that you presented these slides to? Can you recall?
Target customers, I'd say there would be old fabricators that we sort of worked with previously, and then they sort of dispersed and didn't use us over the years. And I guess, you know, some subcontractors or main contractors. Yeah, I just can't remember exactly which clients they would have been, but they would have, a majority of them would have been fabricators. I did a lot of my work with fabricators.
Okay. And you go on in that paragraph to tell us that you also delivered this to a number of architects' practices, but you can't remember who now. Is that right?
I don't recall ever sort of presenting the presentation to a architectural practice on the full CPD program, because it mentions, you know, Renabond in there quite a lot. And as you're probably aware, the REBA is not about the Pacific products. It would have been about an ACM product in general.
Yes, sorry, Mr. Meakins, I'm going to interrupt. You say in that paragraph that you didn't present this as part of a formal RIBA presentation, but you do tell us in that paragraph that you did present to a number of architects' practices, but you can't recall who now. Is that right? Yeah,
it would have been early on. They would have had an idea of what we did via that CPD, yes.
Yeah. Can we just look at those slides for this presentation that you're referring to? If we can go to MET 30's 53183, and I want page 61 of that. So is this the presentation that you were talking about in that paragraph with your name at the bottom there?
Yes, I didn't change any of the presentation whatsoever. It was just my name along the bottom, really, yeah. That was the only piece of information we had, or only slides we had, yeah.
So we can see it's titled Rain Screen Facades, A Guide to Design, Aluminium Composite Material, Introduction to Renabond. And then if we can just look through the slides, if we look at page 64, there's some learning aims of this CPD, and it includes how, item 1, aluminium composite material, what it is and how it's manufactured, and then 2, testing and sustainability and other benefits. Do you see that there?
I do, yes.
And then if we look at page 66, you're explaining in the next, you're explaining there what aluminium composite material is.
That's correct.
Including there the thermoplastic core in the center, yes?
Yes.
And then if we go to page 68, this slide sets out some primary applications. And do you see there's an image of a high-rise building on this slide?
I do, yes.
And do you agree that you were using this presentation to market Renabond for use in high-rise applications?
I honestly say I wasn't using all the slides in this presentation. I was doctoring it for the audience. So if it would have been an architectural practice, these certain slides wouldn't have been used. This was the whole presentation. And I don't recall ever using the whole presentation to a customer. It would have just been certain slides for certain audiences, people that it would have made sense for them to see.
I see. Are you saying that you deliberately doctored the presentation and didn't present this slide to certain people?
It's not that I doctored it. I took some of the slides out that weren't relevant to what they were looking for. If they were looking for a certain product or they were looking for certain information, instead of going an hour's long presentation or a 3/4 of an hour presentation that really wasn't relevant to them, I would take out what was relevant and what wasn't relevant. So I can't recall ever showing that particular slide to any architectural practice.
I see. What about,
does that make sense? Or was that?
What about to a fabricator? Would you have used these slides to market it for high-rise applications to fabricators?
Again, it would have been fabricators. The slides would have been you know, how we manufacture the product at Merksheim, the build-up, they would already know what a build-up of an ACM was, so I wouldn't have bothered showing them that slide. But they would have got an idea of how we go about making the material in Merksheim, and how I think there were slides in there, if you were to look at the whole presentation, about the fabrication of the material and how it's fabricated. We would talk about that and various different things, but very rarely, I can't remember ever showing the whole presentation to anybody, because a lot of it, to be honest, is irrelevant, or it was out of date. It just wasn't the right sort of information that people would want to know.
I see.
In my opinion.
Can we look at page 71 of the presentation now? Here we can see that you've got a title, ACM availability and configurations, and you've got the two different types of core, PE and FR, fire resistant. What did you say to your potential clients about PE and FR when you got to this slide? Did you provide more information about those cores?
I can't recall ever, I would have presented that, yes, because it's a standard sort of slide to the right people. I would have mentioned PE, we do a polyethylene core and we do an FR core, and they're the thicknesses and the widths of the sheets, and that's as far as it would have gone. Questions and answers would have been asked at the end, or as we were going on. You know, it was a very informal sort of presentation.
How did you describe the differences between those two products when you got to this slide?
Well, I would use this PE core as a standard core. We always called it a standard core, because that's what I believed it was. It was a standard core that we'd sort of produced for many, many years, along with all other competitors for 30 years. And then they introduced the FR, fire resistant core, that we also did, that we're very proud of, that, as I mentioned before, under Alan, our sales manager at the time, we were promoting the FR core quite heavily. So we would have mentioned that we do a standard core, a PE core, and an FR core, but that's as far as it would have gone.
Yes, thank you. Can we go to page 73 of the presentation now? This is a slide that's entitled ACM testing ensures confidence. And we can see that the second bullet point down says BBA certified, and it gives the date of the 2008, or it gives the number of the 2008 BBA certificate there. And then we can see two up from the bottom under material integrity. It says supported by full European certification and testing requirements. Do you see that there?
I do see it, yes.
So that would suggest that you were informing customers about European certification requirements, yes, as well as that there was a BBA certificate.
Yes, as I said, I didn't put this presentation together, so these slides would have been in that presentation that I would have inherited.
Mr. Meakins, I understand that, but in your witness statement, you've clearly said that you did deliver this presentation to a number of fabricators and a number of architects' practices. And I'm just seeking to understand, when you delivered it, what you were referring to during those presentations, yes?
Yes, sorry, yeah, I fully understand. Yeah, I would have mentioned, you could see in there, we had a BBA certification.
Yes, I was asking you about the European classifications. If we bring that slide back up. We can see under material integrity, it says supported by full European certification and testing requirements, yes?
Yes.
So would you have informed those you were presenting to what that full European certification and testing requirements were when you got to this slide?
If they would have asked what that meant, that particular section, I would have had to revert back to the technical team and ask them to send any documentation that they required to prove that that's what we did have, yes.
I see. Did you ever inform potential customers of the actual European classifications of the products in your presentation, i.e. that the rivet and cassette respectively got a C and an E classification respectively?
Me personally, no, I wouldn't have given those documents out. That would have gone through the technical team. I say they may have well have asked Merksheim directly and gone around me after the presentation, but no, I didn't, not personally.
Were you ever instructed not to provide that particular information, that those Euroclass information, that Euroclass information? Were you ever told not to provide that unless specifically asked?
No, I don't recall ever being told not to provide any document. I would have asked the question to why we wouldn't provide the document if it's asked for. So no.
I see. And then if we look at page 85, finally, on this presentation, we can see under the heading manufacture of ACM, we can see on the right-hand side, under ACM bonded painted panels, you've got transformation, bending and profiling, and then application, you've got hanging systems, cassette, riveted. So you've got the different applications for the products there, yes?
Yes.
And did you ever explain to customers that the cassette version of the product achieved a different fire classification under the Euro system to the riveted one?
No, I wouldn't have done, because that question I don't recall ever being brought up. So if it had have been, then I would have, as I said, I would have looked further into it and asked the technical team to provide some information on that, but that was never asked.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I think that would be a good moment for the morning break, if that's appropriate for you.
Yes, and that suits you, does it?
Yes, it does.
Good. All right. Yes. Well, we'll stop now for a short break, Mr. Meakins. Please remember not to talk to anyone about your evidence while we're on the break. And we'll come back at 25 to 12, please.
Okay,
All right.
thank you. Thank
Good.
you.
We'll see you then. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. Welcome back, everyone. We'll now go to check that Mr. Meakins can see and hear us well, and then we'll continue with his evidence. You there, Mr.
I can hear you clearly, sir, yes.
Well done, thank you. And you ready to carry on?
I am, sir, yes.
Good. Thank you very much. Yes, Miss Grange, when you're ready.
Yes, thank you. Yes, Mr. Meakins, I'm now going to move on to ask you some questions about your specific involvement in the Grenfell Tower project. Now, we've already seen that there was a gap of around 4 or 5 months between your appointment and Deborah French having left Arconic in December 2014. Were you made aware when you started with Arconic that it was Peter Froelich and Gwenelle Danger had been helping out on the UK side until your arrival?
I was aware that the internal team were sort of covering any calls that would have made directly into France, into the office. But I wasn't sure, I wasn't aware that it was Gwen and Peter.
I see. Now, when you started in your role, the first order for Rainabon 55 PE at Grenfell Tower had already been placed in March 2015, and it was in the process of being supplied to the tower. Is that correct?
I understand it to be, yes.
Now, if we go to your witness statement, now, page 5, paragraph 16. I want to pick this up around 7 lines down in paragraph 16. There's a sentence beginning, it's kind of in the middle of that paragraph, in practical terms. You say there, in practical terms, therefore, this initial period, which included Peter Froelich coming over to the UK and introducing me to existing customers of Arconic, meant that I started my active role as UK sales manager in approximately early July 2015, yes?
Yes, that's correct, yeah.
So is it right that Peter Froelich had actually come to the UK to introduce you to Arconic's customers? Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, he was over for about 3 days, if I remember rightly, introducing me to fabricators. Yes.
And did that include him introducing you to CEP?
I do, but yes, we did. But we visited CEP, yes.
Yes, so you met Mr. Blades at CEP?
Yes, I did, yeah.
Yeah. What about any other UK fabricators? Were you introduced to any of them with Mr. Froelich?
Memory, I guess we would have visited the Argonaut and Genius Facade Systems.
Yeah.
I can't remember exactly who they would have been, but it definitely would have been Genius Facade Systems, and CEP would have been one of them, I believe.
Yeah. Did you meet anybody from Harley Facades, the cladding subcontractor for the Grenfell project?
No, we wouldn't have had any contact with Harley Facades.
Were you made aware that Arconic had previously been involved in a number of cladding projects with Harley?
No, I can't recall ever being told this, that Harley were new to me. So.
Okay. Now, if we can look at your witness statement now, page 7, just on from this, at paragraph 21. You say this, when I started work for Arconic, the first order for the supply of product to CEP Architectural Facades Limited, CEP, in relation to the Grenfell Tower project had already been processed. It would have been referred to, even if only in passing, as part of my induction, though I do not remember exactly when or by whom. However, this was an old project as far as I was concerned, and I did not take an active interest in it. I focused instead on new opportunities. And then you say, prior to the fire, I did not have any details about the Grenfell Tower project, including its height, how it was to be reclad, or what other materials were to be used in the project, beyond some administrative details where I was copied in by virtue of being the Rainabon UK sales manager, as explained below. Now, what do you mean there when you say that it was an old project as far as I was concerned? You say that in the 4th line.
Yeah, when I started with the company, I inherited the CRM system. And on that system, there are lots of projects that I would have had absolutely no sort of part in, I wouldn't have known what the projects were. There were lists and lists of projects that were halfway through, projects that were sort of complete. But from my understanding was any projects when I started with the company would have checked that my name would have been put to them from Deborah French to VM. So I would have just automatically they would have updated the system with a VM next to the projects. Now, all of those projects, because I was brand new to the company, were just new to me. I had absolutely no idea about what they were. As far as I was concerned, Grenfell Tower could have been a bungalow in somewhere. I had no idea what it was whatsoever. So they're all new to me, these projects.
I see. Would it be more accurate to say that it was a project that was ongoing in terms of the supply of Rainabond panels, rather than saying that it was an old project?
I was unaware that it was ongoing. I didn't know that the project was ongoing. What I'm trying to explain to you there, because you look a bit confused, the project started way before my time. I think whatever year it was, 2014, 13, something like that, years before I started with the company. And I guess what had happened was the material was purchased in phases. Now, when I started with the company, I would have literally been there a couple of weeks, and there would have been an order placed for another phase of the Grenfell Tower. But I had no idea. I would have just been CC'd in on that email because I was now the guy in the UK. But I hadn't have completed any of my training, and I just wouldn't have known what that project was. I would have just known it was just it was there in the system, and that was it, really.
I see. Now, you talked about the CRM, the Customer Relationship Management database, and we discussed that in the first day of your evidence. Can we just go to that now? It's at MET 30478. So MET 30478. So this is an extract from that CRM database, and we can see at the top project detail, it's entitled Grenfell Towers in the plural. Do you see that there?
Yes, I can see that, yes.
And we can see under that, under key project information, project name Grenfell Towers, name details Harley, Mark Harris. And then we can see there's potential Rainabond 3,500 square meters on the right hand side there. And if we can then look at the bottom of this page, we can look at the bottom half of it. So there's an entry or heading there, sales detail information, just above the dotted lines. And then underneath that, it says activity, ARC, Rainabond Architecture, main activity, ARC, Rainabond Architecture. And on the right-hand side, it says their owner, Vince Meakins. Do you see that there?
That's correct. That's what I said. Everything was changed into my name. Every project on that system had my name under it.
Yes.
When I started with the company.
Yes, because you were now the UK sales manager for the Rainabond product.
Yes.
Yes. And just above that, a few lines above that, we get some project detail information. We can look just a little bit above that on the page. Yes, so 2 headings up, project detail information. We can see it says origin influencer, and then it says type of building residential. Do you have that?
I can see type of building, yes.
And it says type of market public, yes?
Yes.
So is it right that you were aware of this information, that it was the sale of Rainabond and it was being provided to a public residential building?
No, because I didn't look at this CRM system. I had no reason for me to look at that particular project. Sorry, can you go up to the last page that we looked at prior to this one?
The top of the page?
Yeah, top of the page, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you. I mean, every project where it says sales stage, it says closed 1.
Yes.
that means that that project is closed, it's finished, it's won. So any status that would come up like that on the CRM system, I wouldn't even bother opening. I wouldn't even look at it, because as far as I was concerned, that project had been won, it's closed, and the project is now finished. So I wouldn't have had any dealings with it whatsoever.
I see. Did you ever speak to anybody within Arconic about the Grenfell Tower project? But to Peter Froelich, for example?
I can't recall ever talking to Peter Froelich about the Grenfell Tower project, because it wasn't my project. I had absolutely no dealings with the Grenfell project, so I can't recall ever talking to Peter.
But were you aware that there was a project called Grenfell Tower or Grenfell Towers?
I would have been aware because of the email that I was CC'd in on, that I may have browsed over at the time. But as I said before, I wouldn't have known what type of building that was or what type of project it was, because I just wouldn't have looked at it.
What core did you understand was being supplied for the project? Was it PE core or FR core, as far as you understood it?
As far as I understood it, I had no idea what core had been ordered. I had no idea anything about the project. So I wouldn't have had any idea of what was ordered on that project. And I wouldn't have known. It was a very early stage for me. As I said before, I'd been with the company at that time 4 weeks. So that and all the other hundreds of projects that were on there, I just wouldn't have known what was ordered for that Grenfell project.
I see. You say you weren't positively aware of what core it was. Did you make any assumption as to what core it was?
I would never have made any assumption to what core it was, because I was unaware of the project. I didn't know anything about the project. I wouldn't have made any guesses to what the project or what the core was.
Now, we know from the documents that there were 4 orders of Rainabon PE 55 processed by Arconic between March 2015 and December 2015. The first order was before your time, that was in March 2015. And then there were 3 other orders. There was one on the 6th of July 2015, there was one on the 5th of October 2015, and there was one on the 11th of November 2015. Do you remember those orders being placed?
I personally don't remember the orders, because they would have come direct through into the office. And I guess it would have been Gwendolyn that would have picked the orders up. But no, I don't remember them sticking out in my mind that they were, because they weren't a project that I'd worked on. I had no involvement on the project. So they would have just been orders that would have gone via the office. They wouldn't have come to me directly, if that makes sense.
I see. Can we just look for a moment at what Miss Derendanger says in her witness statement? This is MET 53191, page 44, paragraph 139. So she says here, on the 11th of November 2015, I was copied into an email from Deborah Talbot, CEP, to Vince Meakins, and she says this, who by this point had settled into his role as Rainabon sales agent in the UK, and also copied Neil Wilson, CEP. So is that right, that certainly by this time you had settled into your role as the Rainabon sales agent in the UK?
I guess so. I mean, I, as you know, I started in the May, so I would have been with the company a few months by that time, yes.
Yes. And as a result, we can see in the documents that you were included in the relevant correspondence about the supply of Rainabon to Grenfell Tower. Can we just look at some of that? If we go to ARC 50194. This is an email dated the 20th of July 2015. If we look at the top email, it's from Marie-Claude Jourdan to Neil Wilson of CEP, and it copies in Deborah Talbot of CEP, Miss Derendanger of Arconic, and it also copies in you. Do you see that?
I do see it, yes.
And it's said to be, the subject is Grenfell Tower, London. And the importance is high. Do you see that?
I can see that, yes.
And you would have seen emails like this, wouldn't you, about the orders of Rainabon to Grenfell Tower?
Can I just make it quite clear that I was CC'd in on most emails? I had quite a few emails, as you've probably seen, come through in a week. So I would have had an email flash up. If I'd sort of taken a lot of notice over it, it did say hi. So I probably would have browsed over it. But because of the project name, I wouldn't have really taken an awful lot of notice of it.
Did you understand from this description of the subject, Grenfell Tower, London, that this was a tall building project?
I can't honestly say I would have taken that in consideration. I would have just read it as a London project, and that would have been all. I wouldn't have needed to delve into it any more than that.
I see, but were you aware that this project was a tall building project from the description, Grenfell Tower in London?
Reading this email now, I don't recall ever reading that email, but reading it now, yes, I would say that it would be a high-rise building of some type.
The attachment to this email, if we can go to this now, it's at ARC 50195. This is the order acknowledgement for the order of Rainabon PE in July 2015, so the second order. So here's the order acknowledgement, and we can see in the middle of the page that it relates to Rainabon 55, smoke, silver, metallic, and on the right, after Rainabon 55, each time we can see it says PE 4 times in this document. Do you see that?
I can see that clearly, yes.
Now, would you have looked at this order acknowledgement and been aware that it was PE that was being provided to Grenfell Tower?
No, I can't ever remember seeing this document, and I certainly wouldn't have questioned it being PE because I was unaware of what type of building it was. Now, looking at the email that you've shown me, it says, you know, a high building in London, but at that stage, I would never have put the two together.
But wouldn't you wanted to have been aware of what the existing projects were so that you could develop your knowledge of your customer base and potential future sales with those clients?
This was a project that I had absolutely nothing to do with, as you're aware. My remit was to bring on new fabricators, grow the UK market with the FR product, and move forward with Rainabon as best as we could. We had lots of things in the pipeline, like the A2 product and everything else that we were talking about on a regular basis. So no, old projects for me were there in the pipeline. They had finished, they'd been closed as far as I was concerned. So I wouldn't have looked any further into that project because it states on there, it's closed, it's finished. So as far as I was concerned, that project was finished. It didn't give any other information about who was dealing with the project apart from CEP. So no, I wouldn't have looked any further into that at my stage in the employment.
Are you saying that you weren't aware that this was a large order of Rainabon panels for this project? No,
I wasn't saying that. I do realise it was a large, looking at it now, volume of material for the project, yes.
Yes. Let's have a look at another email, MET 30533161, page 87. This is an email from you to Peter Froelich on the 28th of August 2015. Do you see that?
I do see that, yes.
And again, it's here, the subject is Grenfell Tower's order in the plural.
Yes.
You say, Peter, hi Peter, I've just spoken to Neil on this. He informs me that the above order was placed with us in 2 lots, 3,000 metres square July and 3,600 metres square in August. the material is in their yard and it's signed by you. So it's right, isn't it, that at the time you wrote this, you must have been aware that a significant quantity, over 7,000 meters squared, has been ordered for a project called Grenfell Towers, yes?
Yes, that would have been correct, yes.
Now we know that practical completion of Grenfell Tower occurred in July 2016. And it's right, isn't it, that there was no warranty issued by Arconic for Grenfell Tower?
I have no idea. I have no idea what warranties were. I had no dealings with Grenfell Tower whatsoever, so I wouldn't know about warranties.
Would warranties ever fall under your remit? Was there ever a matter for you to deal with and organise in relation to particular projects?
Warranties would have predominantly come from the tech team, depending on what the build-up of the project was, where it was. It had a lot to do with that. So I generally would have come from Meakins in France.
But would you be aware that a warranty was being sought in relation to a project where you had managed to secure the sale?
Where I secured the sale?
Yes.
If the project was finished and completed by the fabricator, he would have then asked for a warranty, yes.
Yes, and they'd come to you in the first place?
It wouldn't have come from me directly, it would have come from France in the technical team.
And is it right that the process for getting a warranty at this time would have been that someone on the project would have filled in an application questionnaire?
I believe that's later on, yeah, in my employment, we introduced that, yes.
To your knowledge, was the subject of a warranty for the panels at Grenfell Tower ever raised or discussed?
There was no communication between me and Grenfell Tower, anything to do with any warranties whatsoever.
Right. Now, I want to ask you at this point about some emails exchanged on a project relating to the Queensway project. Do you recall that?
I vaguely remember Queensway, yes.
Yeah. I'm going to look at two particular exchanges, one in July 2015 and then one later in the year in November, December 2015. If we can look first at exchanges that took place in July 15, and if we can go to MET 30's53180, page 1. Now, at the bottom of this page, we can see an email from Deborah French on the 30th of July 2015, 6:51, and we can see this is now, Debbie French has now got the Taylor Maxwell email address. That's who she's working for now. And she says, morning Gwen, we have a project we are working on where we are supplying Rainabond and the architect is looking for details on fire rating. Sorry, I should have said this is sent to Ms. Derendanger. And then she says, could you forward to both myself and Chris Taylor copies of current fire certifications for RB Rainabond 55 4mm PE core? Could you also put a description together so we can explain the class of fire rating and length of burn time? If you could also include the same information for the FR core as well, please. Do you have that?
I can see this, yes.
Yeah. And then immediately above that, at the top of this page, we can see that a follow-up email is sent by Deborah French to Ms. Derendanger, and it copies in you this time, as well as others at Taylor Maxwell. Can you see that?
I can see that, yes.
And she says, dear Debbie, please find the document requested. Sorry, I should have gone to the email below that. Do you see Deborah French follows up on the 30th of July and should have said, we have to achieve class 0 rating, both riveted and cassette panels. Do you have that?
I can see that, yes, yeah.
Yeah, and then you're copied in. On the top of that page, we can see an email from Ms. Derendanger, and she's attaching a document which appears to be entitled Class Naught Summary, Rainabon 55. Can you see that?
I can see that, yes.
So in short, we've got a query from Deborah French, now at Taylor Maxwell, about the fire properties of Rainabon 55, or fire performance of the Rainabon 55 PE and FR cores. And she specifically says that they've got to achieve Class Naught for both rivets and cassettes. And a document is provided, and you are copied in to that.
That's correct.
Now, the document she attached is at page 3 of this same document run. If we could go to page 3, this is what was provided. It's called a Class Naught Summary Report. It's by Exover Warrington Fire, and we can see it's dated the 5th of November 2012. And if we look at page 4 now, which is the next page in this summary report, and if we blow up the top half of that page, we can see there's a table which sets out some results to BS 476 Part 6 and Part 7. And what we can see in the table is that this table relates to the Rainabon FR product. Can you see that?
I can see that, yes.
And beneath the table, there's a heading, we've got it on the screen, opinion at the bottom. Exover are saying, we consider the results of the tests of 476 Part 6 and Part 7 demonstrate that the product as tested complies with the requirements for Class Naught as defined in paragraph A13B of approved document B, fire safety. So you're copied in on that. Do you recall this exchange? Do you remember this happening?
I don't remember seeing this email, no, or this document.
So it appears that Arconic have been asked for reports showing that Rainabon was Class Naught, and what has been attached was a report for the FR panel, not the PE panel. Now, did you understand at this time that only the FR cord version of the product satisfied Class Naught? Was that your understanding?
That would have been my understanding, probably later on. I mean, what year was this? Do we know? 2015 again?
Yes, these emails are being sent in July 2015.
Yeah, July 2015. I would have been with the company 4 weeks, so I wouldn't have understood the difference. Sorry, can we go back? Was this the Queensway project, did you say?
Yes, that's our understanding.
Is that a project that was started way before my time of employment again? I think it was a project that I had no dealings with again.
I see, but what we see is you're copied into these emails about test reports.
Yes.
Can we go now to ARC 50669? This picks up the email trail we've just been looking at. Now, at the very bottom of page 1, we can just see the header to the email. We can see on the 31st of July 2015, Deborah French is sending an email to Danny McQuaid and Graham Byrne there, CCing in Chris Taylor and you're CC'd. And the heading, the subject is Re-Fire Rating Certificates and Documents, Rainabon ARC Architecture. And then if we look at page 2, the top of page 2, the email says this: we need to make sure we only order FR core if project needs to achieve an O fire rating. If we don't highlight this to Genius, they only order PE only and it won't have the rating required. Do you see that?
Yes, I do, yes.
So Deborah French is saying very clearly that they need to make sure that they order FR core if it needs to achieve Class Naught. And then she says to you, Vince, can you please confirm if FR is the same cost to us as PE? You see that? So although you're only CC'd, you're asked a question in this email by Deborah French.
Absolutely.
And can you recall her clearly stating that if the project needed Class Naught rating, then it was an FR core that needed to be ordered?
Looking at this email, I know she's asked for an FR price. Because Debbie had already worked for the company prior to me, obviously she was my predecessor, I would assume she would have known that FR was more expensive than PE. So my reply to that, as you can see, is yes, it does cost more than FR and more than PE, and it's based on projects. But as for the FR core, if her client needed an FR rated core, then that's what she would have put forward. Right,
I see. If we scroll up page 1, at the bottom of the page, you reply on the 31st of July at 10:37. We can see in the second half of the page. You say, "Hi Debbie, FR is priced on an individual job basis and additional cost would apply. Kind regards, Vince." Now, you don't correct her in that email and say, no, actually, both the PE and the FR get class 0, do you?
Well, no, because I reading the email at that time, I assumed she needed a FR project, FR material. So I wouldn't have corrected her, no.
Well, she says a bit more than that. She doesn't just say, I want FR. She says, if it needs to be class 0, I need FR, is what she's saying. Did that strike you as something significant when you read that?
No, I didn't honestly read into the email, so it didn't.
Did you think to yourself, well, hang on, I've got a BBA certificate that says all of these panels have class 0, that there's something going on here? Did that occur to you?
No, it didn't occur to me, no.
Were you in fact aware at that time that only the FR core could be shown to be class 0?
The time, I can't recall when this email was sent. Can you remember what date it had on that email?
Yes, 31st of July 2015.
2015, July 2015. Again, I wouldn't have been aware. It would have been very early on in my employment. So no, I wouldn't have looked into that.
I see. Now, in that exchange we just looked at, we saw reference to Genius, which we understand to refer to Genius Facades. That's right, isn't it?
That's correct, yes.
And we heard a little bit from Debbie French about who they were. It's right, isn't it, that John Simmons and Graham Smith were involved in both Genius Facades and Simco, is that right?
I believe they were same business, yes, part of the same business, yeah.
And Graham Byrne worked at Genius Facades, yes?
Yes, he did, correct.
And Genius Facades was a customer of Arconic, wasn't it?
I do believe he was, yes.
And also they were a customer of Taylor Maxwell, yes?
They were, yes.
And they were involved in the Queensway project, that's right, isn't it?
I believe they were. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I believe they were, if you're telling me they were.
Can we now look at an exchange that happens a few months later in relation to this same project? This is in November, December 2015. If we can go to ARC 50672. And I want to start by looking at page 4 of this email chain. We can see an email from Graham Byrne here at Genius Facades to Paul Mears at Taylor Maxwell on the 24th of November 2015. And he says this, Paul, I have had confirmation from Alcoa that if a class 0 spread of flame is required, then we will have to supply the FR core Rainer bond. Do you see that?
I do see that, yes.
So he's saying he's had confirmation from Arconic that if a class 0 spread of flame is required, then we will have to supply the FR core Rainer bond. I hope this helps Graham. And then if we can go up to page 2 now. The email at the bottom of that page is from Lee Homewood of Corova Projects. It's on the 24th of November 2015. And it's to Paul Mears and Graham Byrne at Genius Facades. And he says this, Paul Graham, note your response below. Please can you confirm what the PE core does achieve? We attach copies of the Rainabon BBA Agreement certificate, and although list of certification taken from Rainabon website, both documents seem to suggest that the PE core achieves class 0 spread of fire. I'm a little concerned, given I've already forwarded the attached to the MC, I think that probably means main contractor, when they asked the question about performance in relation to fire, the extra overrate you quoted to go to the FR core. I think the system is going to come under close scrutiny with regards to what testing has been carried out, especially as the building is over 18 metres high and questions are already being asked about the suitability of the Kingspan K15 insulation above this height. Have you carried out any testing on the system, and have you previously installed above 18 metres? From my understanding of the building regulations in relation to fire, which is very limited, in buildings over 18 metres high, the external wall surface must achieve class 0 national class or class B, S3, D2 or better European class. In the Agreement certificate clause 6.1, it states the standard sample achieves B, S2, D0, which is better than the min requirement. And then you can see at the bottom, he says, see below extract. And if we go down a page, now you can take it from me, we've checked this carefully on the documents, that the image that was then embedded in that box on page 3 was diagram 40 from approved document B. Perhaps we can just bring diagram 40 up side by side with this email. If we can look at CLG 50224, page 97. CLG 50224, page 97. So that's diagram 40 from approved document B, which is what was imported into this email. And then the email continues. We can, if we keep those documents both up on the screen, it says, please can you review all of the above and come back to me with the conclusive test data to confirm. Can you speak to Rainabon and see if they can offer the FR core at same rate as the PE core? And then I'll give you a call. Now we'll see in a moment that this chain gets forwarded to you. Do you recall seeing this email and seeing this extract from diagram 40 of approved document B?
No, I'm sorry, I can't recall seeing this document. Again, it was 2015, I think, but by looking at the dates. I keep saying this, but I mean, it was November. I'd been in the company a few months. I had lots of emails coming through. I was bombarded with them, actually. I just can't remember seeing this particular document at all.
Yes, this is 6 months into your employment now as UK sales manager.
Actively 2 months in the field. I was training for a good 3 months, 3 or 4 months in-house, and just visiting customers for the first 4 months. With all due respect, I was still new to the product, so it was very new to me.
So you're now saying your training lasted 3 or 4 months, did it?
No, I mean, to get absolutely, au fait with all of these documents and know the ins and outs of technical details with fire regulations takes a lot longer than a few months.
I see. Let's look up the chain then. What we can see at the bottom of page 1 and top of page 2, this email string was forwarded to you by Graham Byrne on the 25th of November, 2015. So we can see there, 25th of November, to you, copying in Miss Darren Danger and project subject Queen's Way. And if we go to the top of page 2, we can see what Graham Byrne asks you. He says this: Vince, can you please have a look at the email below, as there seems to be some confusion regarding the spread of frame and Rainabond. Also, they are asking if there's any movement on the rates for this project if FR core is required. Now, do you recall this? This is a client raising questions about why the BBA certificate says that all the panels are class 0 when they're now being told that only the FR panel is class 0. Do you remember this?
I can't honestly say I remember this, but I know what I would have done with it. It would have been forwarded straight on to the technical team for them to give me some advice.
I asked you this morning if you were ever aware of any concerns being raised about the BBA certificate. This was such a concern, wasn't it?
I'm sorry, I understand what you're saying, but it wouldn't have stood out in my mind at that time. I would have just forwarded it straight to the technical team. And to me, it wasn't a real concern. It's something that could have been dealt with and sorted once the technical team would have looked at it.
Yes. Let's look on page 1 now of the email chain. What we can see is that this email having been sent to you in November, on the 1st of December, at the bottom of that page, you're being chased for a response. Vince, I'm being chased for this information. I need something back from you this morning so I can go back to the client. And then if we go above that, we see your response, also on the 1st of December. And you say this: "Hi Graham, as per our telephone conversation earlier, I have forwarded your mail to technical so they can confirm in an email all that we have spoken about, understanding that it would look better coming from them. Hopefully this should help. As for the FR prices, I will discuss with Peter, but I'm pretty sure we will not offer FR core for PE at the same price." Now, just looking at what you say in that first paragraph, it would appear that you have given some information over the telephone, which then you are inviting technical to confirm what that information was. Is that right?
No, it's not right. I would have discussed with Graham the price of the FR being more expensive. But as for the technical side, that would have directly went straight to France. I vaguely remember waiting for a reply, and I still don't think we got a reply on the time we needed it. It took a long turnaround.
So where you say in that email, I forwarded your email to technical so they can confirm in an email all that we have spoken about. Are you saying that you hadn't imparted any technical information over the telephone to Mr. Byrne prior to that email?
I think what I've done is I've worded that incorrectly. What I meant was the conversation that we'd had prior to the email would have been about the price of the materials. I mean, if you would speak to Graham Byrne, I'm sure he'll tell you the same thing.
Well, you then say, understanding that it would look better coming from them. So what you're saying is it's going to look better if technical will confirm this in writing. But the strong implication from this email is that you have imparted some technical information to Mr. Byrne over the telephone, yes? No,
that's incorrect. The understanding that it would look better coming from them, what I meant was by that is I just haven't got the technical ability to answer that question. So it would look much more professional if it was coming from the technical team and explaining to them exactly what they needed.
So you can't recall what you told Mr. Byrne about whether all the panels had class 0 or only the FR panel?
I can't recall even having the conversation with Mr. Byrne.
If we now go, following this chain forward to page 30 of MET 53180. Yes, so this is carrying on with this story. The second email down in the chain is from Claude Verler back to you on the 3rd of December. And he says, "Dear Vince, the BBA certificate for Rainer Bond is still valid. Concerning the point spread of flame, please note that our Rainer Bond FR is classified B, S1, D0 when tested in accordance with the European standard EN 13501. Please find as attached document our valid certificate." Do you see that?
I do see that, yes.
So Mr. Verler is telling you that the BBA certificate for Rainer Bond is still valid. And then he's telling you that the FR panel is classified as B in accordance with the European standard, yes?
Yeah, from that email, yes, definitely.
So Mr. Verler must have thought that you would understand what he meant when he was referring to that European classification, yes?
I assume so, or he was just telling me so I could then forward that information on to the client.
Did you think that this satisfactorily answered the query that had been raised? That query was, does the PE panel have class naught?
Well, if I recall this vaguely, this would have been, we needed an answer quite quickly on this project. And I think I was being pestered by Graham Byrne for an answer. So anything that would have been sent from the technical team would have just been forwarded straight to Graham. And I wouldn't have looked into what was necessarily put in the email. I thought that would have answered their question if it hadn't answered their question. I'm sure they would have come back to me and then I've had to dig a little deeper.
So is it your evidence that you didn't notice that Mr. Verler hadn't clearly answered the question, does the PE get class naught?
I'm afraid so, yes. I didn't look at that email. It would have just been forwarded, as you probably know, onto the client.
If we can look now at page 38 of that same document run, MET 30 53180. What we can see here is an email from a lady called Anira Bennett, who's we believe it Taylor Maxwell, to Deborah French, and copying in someone else at Taylor Maxwell on the 3rd of December 2015. You're not copied on into this. And she says, hi Debs, as discussed, reference the above. I understand that Corova projects are expecting an order from Osborne's next week for 1,700 metre squared Genius discrete ACM. The building is over 18 metres in height and therefore requires a class 0 rated product in respect of fire spread. And then she says, we've quoted Corova for PE core Rainabon panels and also included an uplift on the quote for the FR core panels. However, Corova have used the PE core price. And then she says, based on the information in the BBA certificate, which states, and then she sets out information in the BBA certificate. And then in the final paragraph, she says, the client are very unlikely to accept an uplift in cost at this stage. And as such, we are at risk of losing the order to Aluka Bond, who supply only class 0 rated panels to the UK. My understanding is that Corova want to support us. However, we need to find a way to supply the Rainabond FR core material at the same cost as we've currently quoted for the PE core. Appreciate your help with this. And then if we go up to page 37, one page up in this string, there's an email at the bottom of that page at 9:17 on the 4th of December 2015 from Graham Byrne of Genius Facades to you. Again, subject Queen's Walk, Reading, Rainabon fire rating. And he says this, Vince, I need you to have a look at the attached email below from Taylor Maxwell and come back to me as soon as you can. This FR uplift is becoming a real issue. So would you have read the email below, which was again asking questions about whether or not the PE core had class 0?
If I'm honest, I would have read the email from Graham saying this FR uplift is becoming a real issue because we'd been talking about the price of the FR over the PE and how he needed a reduction in price. So I wouldn't have read the email that had come through. It would have just been the fact that he needed a better price for FR.
I see.
And that is out of my hands. That would have been a Peter at the time that would have been able to give him a better price for the FR material.
I see. So is it your evidence that even though he says, I need you to have a look at the attached email below from Taylor Maxwell, that you just wouldn't have looked at that email, but would have just addressed an issue about the FR pricing uplift?
It depends on where I was or what I was doing at the time this email would have come through. I may have looked at it, scanned over the email, but because it was their client, it's not my client, I would assume it was just about the FR uplift in price. So I wouldn't have taken that on in depth.
Sorry, but surely you would have wanted to understand the reason why you were being asked to provide FR at PE prices.
No, we get that asked a lot. We get asked, I remember, this is 2015 again, isn't it? I know I keep relaying back to that, but it was very new to me, even though I'd been with the company a few months. You know, I had a lot to digest, I had a lot to take in. It was a big job for me, being the only UK manager, sales manager in the UK even. So I would have looked at that email, I would have scanned my eye over it, but I wouldn't have taken it in absolute, the reasons to why they needed the FR over the PE. The thing that stood out to me is the fact that they needed the PE material at the same cost as FR. Well, that just didn't happen. We couldn't do that.
Surely as a big job, I mean, this is being flagged as a big project, which is important. You would have paid this considerable attention, wouldn't you?
I think I didn't have a dealing in Queensway. So again, it's not my project. I don't know what the project was. I wasn't involved in the project. So this would have been a project that I would have inherited. So I would assume that Genius Facades would have known all about the project and what they needed and what they didn't need for the project. Now, be that right or wrong, at that time, I had a lot of information to take on board that year, it was a brand new job. I was hoping he knew what he needed and he had everything he needed for the job. I didn't ever get involved in this project as far as the emails that were sent to and fro asking me for better prices on the job.
Okay, can we go now to ARC 50683? This continues the email chain. And if we look at page 4, ARC 50683. We can see this is an email dated the 8th of December 2015 from Graham Byrne at Genius Facades, addressed to you and Miss Darren Danger, CCing Peter Froelich, again, subject Queen's Walk, Rainabond fire spread. And he says, Vince, please see below an email that I've received from Taylor Maxwell. Again, this is due to the confusion within your BBA certification. So just pausing there, you would have been aware in December 2015, yes, upon reading this email, that there was confusion about the BBA certificate.
If I'd have read the email, yes, 2015 again, so fairly new to the company, but reading that email, you would have thought there would have been some sort of confusion with regards to the BBA certification.
Yes, I mean, why wouldn't you have read this email? It's addressed to you.
Exactly.
So he says, please see below, etc. And then he says, can we please get this sorted as soon as possible, as it's been going on for a while? Would you be able to obtain a formal response from Rainabond's technical department, the spread of flame? You'll be aware of the discrepancy between Rainabond's BBA and literature regarding fire spread of their PE and FR core panels from recent conversations with Paul and Debs. Now, is that right, that you were aware of the discrepancy between Rainabond's BBA and literature regarding fire spread of their PE and FR core panels from recent conversations with Paul and Debbie French, yes?
No, I don't recall having a conversation with Debbie French and Paul. I very rarely had a conversation at all with a client of Debbie's. I mean, Debbie used to work for the company, so she could answer most of the questions that needed to be answered with her clients. She knew Rainabond, she knew Arconic inside out. So there was no real cause for me to talk to her about a PE or an FR core, and not a lot of change since she'd left and I'd started. So there was no reason for me to sort of get too involved. She knew, and she'd been working for that period that the area was vacant with clients for Rainabond.
So are you saying that this email didn't raise any alarm bells for you, that there was said to be confusion about your BBA certificate, and that there was a discrepancy between BBA's literature and other conversations that have been had with Arconic?
I'm saying I would have read the email. I would have forwarded the email on to the technical department as requested. And hopefully they would have got back to Graham with the correct answers that he needed. But that's as far as I would have taken it.
In the final paragraph, Graham Byrne asks, he says, the architect client are now asking for a letter from Alcoa explaining why the FR core is required to achieve class 0 rating when their literature indicates a PE core will achieve class 0. Regards, Graham. It's a simple question, isn't it?
It is.
Why is Arconic saying that you have to use FR to get class 0 when your BBA literature suggests that the PE will achieve class 0? It's a very straightforward question, isn't it?
Yeah, and I would expect it to have a straightforward answer to the question from the technical team.
I see, but it was a question you fully understood at the time, yes?
I can't say I fully understood, but I took it on board. I read it, and I sort of, any issues or anything that I was unaware of or not completely satisfied with giving a correct answer, I would forward the email directly to the technical team for their advice and how to approach it.
If we go down to the bottom of page 3 in this string, in the same document, what we can see is that you forward this email to Claude Verler, Peter Froelich, and Miss Darren Danger. Do you see that there? On the 8th of December 2015 at 9:43. And you say, good morning, Claude. Please, can you take a look at the email below and respond accordingly as requested? And then we can see Claude Verler's response in the next email up on page 3. It's back, this email is coming back to you. And he says this, he says, dear all, indeed, in accordance with the British standards, BS 476, both Rainabon PE and Rainabon FR are well classified when tested for spread of flame. And then he says, nevertheless, in Europe, all the products should be tested in accordance with the European standard EN 13501 since 2000. And when tested like this, there is a big difference between those two products, PE and FR. You see that there?
I do, yes.
Taking that in stages, what did you understand him to mean in that first sentence when he says that both PE and FR are well classified when tested for spread of flame? What did you understand that to mean? I
would looking at this now, because I can't remember this email exactly, or this text or whatever it is. It's going back quite a few years. I would assume that reading that we were covered in accordance to British standards, both for PE and FR. But
he hasn't answered the very simple, sorry, Mr. Meakins, he hasn't answered the very simple question, has he? He hasn't answered the question whether the PE is class 0. He hasn't answered that in this email, has he?
It doesn't appear he has, no.
Did you notice that at the time?
No, I'm sorry, I didn't know.
Did you notice that he then tells you that when tested in accordance with the European standard, there is a big difference between those two products? Did you notice that?
I didn't. I can't honestly say I did, no.
Well, this is a very short email. Wasn't that pretty important information for you to be aware of? That when tested in accordance with European standards, there's a big difference between those two products. And we're talking clearly about fire spread here from the title of the email.
If I'm absolutely honest, it's the time, again, the period that I was working, is early on in my employment. However, gone to Peter, and I would expect if there was a problem with that email for it to be flagged up by Peter or someone with a little bit more knowledge about the fire standards. I didn't really take that. I didn't digest it.
I see. You say you didn't digest it, but did you come away with a clear understanding from reading that there was a big difference between how those two products performed in fire based on European testing?
No, because I didn't actually take on board that last part of the paragraph. I wouldn't have actually digested it. I would have taken it on board in my mind. I'm not sure what I was doing when the email had come. So no, if I'm honest, I didn't take it massively on board. It would have just been, it's been dealt with and it's been sorted.
We can see that you forward Mr. Verla's response on to Mr. Byrne at Genius Facades. We can see that at the very bottom of page 2 and on to page 3 of this chain. We look first at page 2, right at the very bottom there, on the 9th of December 2015, it's from you. And then if we go over the top of the next page, we can see it's to Graham Byrne at Genius Facades. And you say, "Hi, Graham, please see response from Claude below. Hope this helps catch up later." And then if we go up to page 2, we can see Mr. Byrne's response, which is sent to you. This is on the 9th of December 2015. It's back to you from Mr. Byrne, copying in Mr. Verla, Claude Verla. And he says this, he says, "Vince, I cannot send the information provided to the architect client. I need more detail. This is a little confusing again, as it is saying that both PE and FR have spread of flame. Is it that the PE core has a spread of flame, but not a class 0 spread of flame? If the PE core has a spread of flame, what is it classed as?" Again, the architect client are asking for a letter from Alcoa explaining why the FR core is required to achieve class 0 rating when their literature indicates a PE core will achieve class 0. Have they read the information incorrectly and both are classified as having spread of flame, but only the FR is classified as class 0? Claude states the following: "Indeed, in accordance with the British standards, BS 476, both Rainabon PE and Rainabon FR are well classified when tested for spread of flame. Again, this needs to be expanded on. What is PE classified as and what is FR classified as?" Graham, do you see that?
I do see it, yes.
So Mr. Byrne was not content with the information that had been provided, was he?
It doesn't seem that way, no.
Did you speak to Mr. Verla at this time about this and the pressing that you were getting from Genius Facades on this question?
I would have done, for sure. I mean, anything like this would have been forwarded on and asked for him to give more of a detailed reason or answer to the question, you know, so it would have been forwarded straight to the technical team.
Did you press Mr. Verla to give a more detailed answer?
I would have asked Mr. Verla if it said there for a letter that they're asking for some sort of letter of explanation. As you can see, can we possibly do something? Because, you know, this client needs this information and I can't give them the information. Please, can you do it?
Mr. Meakins, Mr. Grange, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm very conscious that in answer to a lot of questions, Mr. Meakins is telling us what he would have done. And what I'd like to know a bit more clearly is whether Mr. Meakins can remember his reaction to any of these emails, and if he can, what he did, and if he can't, whether he's simply speculating about what he thinks he would have done. Can you help, Mr. Meakins?
Yes, I understand, sir. I think, to be perfectly honest, I can't quite remember a lot of these emails, and I'm speculating, which is not the right thing to do. I'm assuming, which is not a good thing to do, that I would have sent the emails on to the technical team to deal with them in a technical level, because I was very confused and couldn't answer their questions.
Well,
that helps, sir.
Yeah, well, that's helpful. Thank you. I mean, you're perfectly entitled to tell us what you normally did in the course of dealing with things, which is just another way of saying what I would have done. But it's quite important in some cases for us to know to what extent you can actually remember something. So when you tell us, for example, that you did not read or did not digest an email, I think it would be helpful if we could understand whether you can remember that you didn't bother to read it, or that you can't remember whether you read it or not.
I understand, sir. And in this circumstance, I can't remember if I read it or not would be the answer.
Right. Okay. Well, sorry to interrupt you, Miss Grange.
No, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. do you remember having to press Claude Verler to provide more information on this general topic?
I remember sending an email to Claude of some type asking for an answer. Yes.
Do you remember speaking to him on the telephone and pressing him to provide further information?
No, I can't remember a conversation on the telephone.
If we look at page 1 now of this chain, we can see Mr. Verler's response to Mr. Byrne and to you, having been asked for more information. So in that second email from the top, 9th of December, he says to you and Mr. Byrne, "Dear all," and then he says, "Both of the results shown in the chart below give us a class naught summary report." And he's set out in a table results that he says Rainabon PE and Rainabon FR get 0.90, class 1, class 1. And then he says this: "The analysis I did is that our 2 products are class naught when tested in accordance with BS 476 part 6 and 7. This is not an exception, as in France, for example, both products are classified M1 in accordance with NF 92504. And then he says this: "The BS and NF test are not sensitive enough to make a significant difference between our 2 products. I stay at your disposal for any further question." So we can see here that Mr. Verler is stating in this email that according to his analysis, the 2 products, PE and FR, get class naught. Do you recall ever asking for any underlying information that supported that analysis? Any test certificates, any certifications which showed that it was classified as class naught?
I'm sorry, I don't remember. I don't recall reading that email.
And then we see Mr. Byrne's response to Mr. Verler at the top of this chain on page 1, again on the 9th of December 2015. He says, "Claude, thank you for the information. I'll pass this to the architect client. I am sure they will come back and ask why they have been advised by Alcoa to use FR instead of PE to get the class naught spread of flame if the both form the same. If they do come back to me, I'll contact you again." Do you see that there?
I do, yes.
And do you remember discussing this with anyone at this stage?
I'm afraid I don't know, sorry.
Do you remember being aware, even in general terms, that the information Mr. Verler was providing was suggesting that the difference between the 2 products was evident when tested to the European classification system?
No, I'm sorry, I don't.
If we can go now to ARC 50685. This is an email from Mr. Byrne on the 9th of December 2015 at 16:36. Mr. Byrne comes back to Mr. Verler and CCs you, and he's attaching the BBA certificate to his email. And he says, "Claude, I'm sorry and thought that I would have something back from the architect client. Please see below question which has come back from the architect. I have looked at the information that you provided, and as far as I can see, they are correct, but can you please confirm that I've understood the information correct?" And then the question that's come back from the architect is then set out. And it says this: "The Queen's Walk project requires materials to be class naught rated for fire spread. Based on the attached BBA certification, is it correct that we can use PE core material?" So a simple question is coming back again. Do you see that?
I do.
Do you remember in general terms that there was a lot of pressing by Genius Facades relating to this project about getting more detailed information on fire performance?
I do remember that they were after some answers. Yes.
Now can we go to ARC 50688? And I want to look at page 4 of this chain. This is carrying on this story. So we can see that you sent an email on the 10th of December 2015 to Tom Dunn of Genius Facades, saying that you'd spoken to Claude Verler and he was going to ring Tom. You say, "Hi Tom, I've spoken to Claude earlier. He said he was going to discuss with you the current issues. Has he called you?" And then Tom, what we see in this chain is Tom Dunn then chases about getting a call from Claude Verler. There's then obviously a missed call where Mr. Verler does call Genius Facades but doesn't get through. And then at the very top of this chain, we can see on page 1 a number of JPEG attachments are sent by Mr. Verler to Graham Byrne, Tom Dunn at Genius, and copying you in. Actually, you're not copied, it's sent to you as well. And the subject is re-FRPE question. And there's a number of attachments with JPEG files that are sent. Now, I just want to break off at this point and look at Mr. Verler's witness statement where he explains to us what these images were. If we can go within Claude Verler's statement, that's MET 53190 at page 32. At paragraph 112, Mr. Verler says, "On the 10th of December, I spoke to and received a further email from Vince and then from Tom Dunn requesting that I call Graham, which I tried to do without success. We did speak on the 11th of December, and following that, I sent Genius some photos which were taken during a Polish fire test in 2005, which was a more stringent and perhaps rudimentary test than the EN 13501 test, but I thought most clearly demonstrated the difference between the PE and FR products. The following day, I provided a letter to Genius which confirmed that the BS 476 Part 6 and 7 test does not distinguish between the PE and FR products, as both are classified class 0 when tested in accordance with that standard. I also noted that those two products are very different in their behaviour when exposed to a flame, and we're going to look at that letter in a moment. Now, do you remember looking at these images of the Polish fire test that Mr. Verler sent to you and to Genius at this time in December 2015?
No, I don't remember looking at the images.
Can we just have a look at those, and this may help as to whether you can recall looking at them. If we can go to ARC 50693. So these are images taken from the PE core Rainer-Bond test. You can actually see if we blow up the top half of that photograph, there is a reference on the sample to ALPE. Do you see that?
I do, yes.
And it's dated the 22nd of July 2005. So these are the images from the Polish tests. And there were 3 photographs taken of that PE test. This was the first one. And then Mr. Verler also sent, if we can go to the next one, which is ARC 50691. There is the second image taken from that Polish test of the PE cord ACM. Can you remember seeing that image?
I can't remember, no, I'm sorry. Again, I was hoping that Claude Varley would have just dealt with the technical issue that they were after. So I honestly can't remember opening that.
Well, he appears to be sending these images because what he's saying is that these tests show much more clearly what the difference is between the PE and the FR product, yes?
I assume so, yes.
And then there's another image of the PE test taken after the fire is extinguished. This is ARC 50692. We can see there that the panels have been completely consumed by fire in that test, yes?
Yes.
And then he sent 2 images of the FR core test, the Polish test. If we can go to them, they are ARC 50694. That's the FR test. And then if we can look at ARC 60595. So that appears to be the FR test after the flame and the crib have been extinguished. You can see the extent of damage afterwards. Now, can we just put up 2 images side by side from that run? I want to put up ARC 50691 and ARC 60694. Now, I appreciate we don't know how long it is into these 2 tests, but we've seen what the end result is. These photos are pretty striking, aren't they?
I'm sorry. Yes, you can see the fire. Yes.
Do you remember looking at these photographs and seeing how differently these 2 products performed in fire?
No, I don't. No, I'm sorry, I don't.
Can we agree that had you looked at these photographs, you would have appreciated that they performed very differently in fire?
If I'd have read the email that had come through and the pictures and opened it up at a later date, it was very early on, as I say, in my employment again, I probably would have done, for sure. But at that moment in time, I can't say.
So is your evidence that you just can't tell us, you can't say whether or not you looked at these images at this time or not?
I didn't look at the images and I didn't read the email in full. So I wouldn't have seen these pictures at that time, I'm afraid. I'm sorry.
But wasn't this vitally important information for you to be aware of when you're selling these products to the UK market?
I was really hoping, as I mentioned before, that the technical team would have answered all the questions that needed to be answered for the client. And I'm afraid I didn't look at the photographs or read the email in depth. I assumed that the product that we had was fit for purpose, as it had been prior 30 years it'd been installed in the UK. So I assumed that the product was fit for purpose, or the products.
But what we've seen is in a series of emails, Mr. Verler is trying to convey, at least at the end of these chains, that the products are performing very differently under fire, and that the national test, the Class 0 test, and indeed the French national test, doesn't expose those differences. Were you not aware of that? I can see that now. I don't think it was explained to me in any urgency that this is the case. It should have been, looking back on it, these should have been quite clearly put to me, that these 2 products are completely different. And it wasn't. If we could go to ARC 50696. This is Mr. Verler on the 14th of December saying to you, Graham, Byrne and Tom Dunn. He says, "Dear Graham, following our phone call on Friday, please find enclosed a document on Alcoa letterhead to confirm the discussion. I hope this document, added to the photos I sent on Friday, will help to unlock the situation. I stay at your disposal for any further question." And as Mr. Verler referred to in his witness statement, and we saw earlier, he wrote a letter on this project on Alcoa headed letter paper about this question. If we can just go to that letter. This is at ARC 50699. It was an attachment to that email. We can see it here. It's to Genius Facades, dated the 14th of December 2015. And he says, "Dear partners, we kindly are coming back to you concerning the issues you have on the Reynabond fire reaction class in the UK. The British Standard BS 476 Part 6 and 7 are not relevant to distinguish between our Reynabond PE and our Reynabond FR. Both are classified class 0 when tested in accordance with this standard. But those two products are very different in their behaviour when exposed to a flame. This difference is shown when tested in accordance with the European standard EN 13501, where following classes are achieved: Reynabond PE class E, Reynabond FR class B. If further help and advice is required, then please let us know and we will be happy to look for a solution." Now, do you remember reading this letter?
I remember Graham getting a letter, but I don't remember the ins and outs of the letter.
Do you have a recollection of reading it, even if you don't remember the detail of what was in it?
No, I don't, I'm afraid. I'm sorry.
Wasn't this a fairly unusual step for Mr. Verla's team to have to issue technical information in a formal letter?
I wasn't sure. I mean, I've never come across it before, so I wasn't entirely sure if that was the right sort of thing that people, or the common sort of thing that a fabricator or someone would ask for. So yeah, I'm not, I can't answer that question, I'm afraid. I've never come across it before.
Well, given that you hadn't come across it before, and we've seen it's a pretty short letter, doesn't take long to read, isn't it likely that you would have read it and digested it at the time?
No, it's not. I mean, I would have started, as I said before, anything technical initially in 2015, when I'd started with the company, when this letter was being sent, I would have just hoped that the issue with the products that the customer had would have been rectified by the technical team, and I wouldn't have actually digested that in full.
This letter tells you that the PE is class E, contrary to the statement in the BBA certificate that it was class B. Surely you noticed that, no?
No, I'm afraid I didn't. I'm sorry.
But did you come away with the clear message that the national testing didn't flush out sufficiently what the true fire performance differences were between these two products?
No, I'm afraid I didn't. Sorry, because I didn't digest it.
Would you agree that Genius Facades and their client had to press very hard for the information about the difference between the PE and the FR products?
I would agree to that, yes. They were asking me to contact Claude in the technical on several occasions, yes.
Yes, they had to come back again and again.
They did.
Before they got any proper information about the fire performance of those products. You accept that?
I do accept that. That's correct, yes.
Following this episode, did you tell customers that Reynabond PE was a European Class E product that performed badly in fire?
In answer to your question, no, I didn't ever specify any PE on my project, so that would never have come up.
So you're saying that after this point, you just never discussed PE with anybody?
No, I'm not saying that. I would have discussed PE as a standard core, as I mentioned before, and the FR being a fire retardant core. But the projects that I was dealing with, the new projects that were coming up, were generally specified an FR product.
But if they weren't, would you tell customers that Reynabond PE was European Class E and performed badly in fire?
It depends on what the circumstances were, depend on what the building was. If the building was obviously a large tower, then the PE conversation would never have come up because they wouldn't be specifying that on the building. If it was if it was a low-rise building, again, I wouldn't have asked that question because they were specifying the PE product, hopefully knowing what it was. it had been sold into the UK for many, many years. And I assumed that they would understand what a PE product was, a standard core.
Did you ever question whether it was right to continue to supply Rainabon PE, given its E classification and its poor performance in fire?
Of course, after the tragedy, the fire, we stopped manufacturing the product. And of course, then...
Sorry, Mr. Meakins, I'm not asking about after the fire. I'm asking about after this episode with Genius Facades and this letter being written. Did you ever question whether it was right to continue to supply Rainabon PE, given its E classification and its poor performance in fire?
Did I ever question it? Sorry, with my peers, with Arconic? No,
Yeah.
I didn't. I'm afraid. No, I didn't.
Can you help us as to why not?
Because I assumed, as I said before, that the product was fit for purpose in the UK. The BBA obviously was stating different things, and where it came for specifications on the architectural side, then the question, the PE never come up. So I never had that. I never had the reason to question or mention that, because it was very rarely specified. And if it was, then it would have been changed.
What about existing projects which were ongoing, where PE was being supplied to those projects? Did you ever question whether it was appropriate to continue to supply those products to projects like the Grenfell Tower project?
I understand. I again, didn't have any dealings with those projects, so I was unaware of what was specified for the projects at the time. And no, I never questioned, because I was never asked the question.
Mr. Chairman, I note the time. That's a good moment for a break in any event. Thank you.
Yes, no, you haven't finished with Mr. Meakins, I take it.
No, I'm afraid I haven't. And I've got probably around an hour still to go with him, I'm afraid. I will view my notes over the lunch hour, but there are, and I'll be as quick as I can this afternoon, but I do have some more questions I would like to put to this witness this afternoon.
Right, yes, very well. Well, thank you very much. Well, there we are, Mr. Meakins. We're going to have a break now so we can all get some lunch. We'll come back at 2 o'clock, please.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Please remember not to talk to anyone about your evidence or any aspect of it over the break. And we'll see you a bit later on. 2 o'clock.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. 2 o'clock, everyone. Thank you.